Again, welcome back to Three Bridges. I'm Mark. So today's 13th of July 2025. It's a Sunday. I'll do the intro now. I've no idea when this video will get uploaded. I suspect it will be September, October time. I'm going to record one section of the layout, so it's the Aylesbury board from start to finish, and I'm not going to sort of upload anything during that period. So you'll just see it as one long episode. I'll try and keep it to about 45 minutes, but there's a lot to go into it because obviously I've got the baseboard to build, I've got the tracks to lay, the wire, the point wadding to do, and then all the buildings. And it's more the buildings actually for me. This Aylesbury layout is the important bit. There's also the track plan. So Aylesbury today is very different to the Aylesbury I remember. I remember the Aylesbury of the 60s and 70s. So I'm going to base my design on that. So when I decided I was going to do the layout, I obviously had a box of stuff in the loft from my childhood, and included in that there were two boxes. The one had all the stock and the track, and then the other one had the buildings. So these are the silver line paper kits that you could build. And my dad made me the station platform and a couple of station buildings. There's bits of those buildings that still exist, so I always wanted to include them in the layout. So that's what I'm going to do. So they look old and knackered. I don't care because they're part of my childhood, and my dad didn't do a lot for me. There goes the cross country down to Plymouth or Exeter. He's bringing back a lot of those memories of my dad. So my dad died when I was 37. Massive heart attack at 64. And so when you're getting nearer the age that your dad died, it does affect you. So it affected him. His father died when so my grandfather died at 54, and I know the year my dad just sat in a chair when he got to 54. He did nothing. I think he also never believed he would outlive his father. But we'll see how the build goes, and I hope you enjoy it. So it's the Aylesbury end of the loft. If you watched a couple of episodes back, you remember I was talking about, before I can plan out Aylesbury here, just needing to understand what happens with this incline at the back. So my original idea was it would run along the back here and come along. But at this point, so the next sort of level up is about here. It would still be a bit lower than it. I'm trying to show you on a really simple sketch. So that black is that level at the back there, and it needs to run behind what effectively would be rugby station and come up this little trough. And it makes the framework quite complicated and just a bit ridiculous really, because we'll be able to see the trains. They'll be in a little trough at the back. They don't sort of join up with the rest of the second level till about here because of the incline. So I slept on it, and this morning I realised a sensible thing to do. So these are the boards at the back that will have rugby, and I'll bring the incline round at the front. So as always, I do a quick sketch of the area. So the hash bits are the roof beams coming through the roof struts, so these things, and then basically I've got a simple framework there. I'll work out where the cross struts are going to go. That will basically tie into the end B-frame here, and then I've worked out a sort of reasonable size board to put Aylesbury on, still allowing me a gap to squeeze through here. The next thing to do is I can start making up the framework for the Aylesbury board. So I've measured up, so I've basically got to make two frames, this one and this one, so that I'm forming an L. I don't need to do return yet because there is no return, but I may have a small board at the end here, depending. I need to be able to turn around steam trains. Still wondering if I do a Y or what. Anyway, so those are the boards, and the only real undecided were these cross struts here. and I don't want them to basically to foul where I'm having points and point rodding. So having got the dimensions of this, and I can make it the frameworks, I've had the design for Aylesbury right from the beginning, really, because it is literally Aylesbury. So based on that and then the shape, I now know that I've got points here, and some points here, so I'm quite happy about where I'm going to put my cross struts, and I'll just do a cutout at the front section so that I can fit the rodding through to sort of a control panel about here. Very briefly, the two open frameworks are in. So with this one, which joins onto the Wendover board, and that's the sort of end bit of the Wendover board, it went fine, no problems at all. Just slotted in, and it's bolted through to here now. And then this one I'd forgotten about, so I'd got the strut at the end, and there's no way you can get it in. So I've had to take that strut off, drop it in, and then I've worked out the sort of the maximum position I could have with allowing it to then still be able to angle that framework in. That's fine, it just means I just need to concentrate on where the points sit at this end of the Aylesbury station. So what I can do now is I've got some baseboard for this part. I'll get that up, and I now have a rough play around with some old Hornby track of how I want the layout to look. It's obviously a plan, but until you actually get track down on the board and play around with it, plans are literally just plans, I find. I know other people go off the plan and agree and then stick to it rigidly, but I quite like to just adapt as I go along. Okay, so it's a few days later, and I've started laying out the rough track positions for the Aylesbury station. So as you sort of leave Wendover, I need to have a crossover so that you can basically, the up and the down can both pass over to each side in both directions. So put these two in here, and then I've got another couple over here where I'm using sort of fourth radius curved points, just because I need to get round this roof beam with the main up and down into the Aylesbury station, which is about there. And then the other line is the end of the Ridgeborough line, so it's coming in. Originally I thought it would sort of snake around here. It's just too tight. So what I'm going to do is I'll put it through his side. I have to rethink this bridge. Originally had the first Scratchbill Farm Bridge at the end of Wendover. It's more of a scenic break. And so the line needs to go through this gap, so I'll put the track in and worry about the scenics another day. So that's how it starts. So this is all just temporary polystyrene sheet, but I think I'll just cut some board that'll fit it, and then I can build up a bit of an embankment behind. There is a road bridge as you're sort of leaving Aylesbury station, so I might want to put that one in over here again. And then you come around to, so I'm going to have this as the signal box, so I'll show you an image of Aylesbury South signal box. So I think it was disused, pretty much getting close to being disused. So this is one of the models my dad built for me. It's gone through the walls a bit, so there's bits missing. So I'm going to have it as almost it's disused, sort of to go. So that'll be the look I'll go for. And as you can see, the ladder's already gone. And then as you come into the station, effectively through the middle of it, there is the main up and a down. Okay, and these are the two Great Central lines that would have gone off to Sheffield and, well, Rugby first, Leicester, and then Sheffield. So they'll sort of pass through. And then there was a sort of another bypassing loop. So here, and as that sort of rejoins, there was a line into a goods shed, and so I put up an image of that actual structure. And so the goods shed is slightly differently, but again, this is a structure my dad built for me. I've had to reinforce it inside with wooden struts to just try and get the shape back, because it was heavily distorted after 40 years in the loft, but I want to keep it. The other things I've still got that he built was the footbridge. It's very bashed up. This tiny bit, so this is the last of the central island platform, the rest of it's squashed. And then I've got bits of the main station and a few bits of platform. So I know I can still get the quick kits sort of platforms. So I will, combination of some new and old, bash that together. So just a quick update from this end of the loft to the Aylesbury board. So I've started laying the track. I'm quite happy with the position of the points, so just sort of joining up in between. So I've got the this one where I sort of disused goods bay. I'm looking at some old pictures actually of Aylesbury from so this was March 63, so it was the year I was born, but earlier in the year when they had the heavy snow. And it shows actually that there was a goods line somewhere about here. That obviously all got ripped out by the time we got to the 70s. So there was a small goods depot at Aylesbury, sort of in the leading up to the sort of, I suppose, 60s. So I've got the two main lines through. Somebody makes a point about so for the lower deck I've used set track for all my points, and I know they make the point that it would all look a lot better if I had the sort of longer points. So I've started over here to use them. So these are the largest and then the in-between ones, and things do flow a lot easier. It was just that with the lower board I always knew that, or the lower deck, I was going to be really pushing it. One thing it has taught me though is that when I come to do the second and third deck, where I want to have my key stations, and I'd originally planned to have them at the end of the loft here, because I just get a lot of visibility. So one station each end of the loft. What I have realised is that yes, I can get all the platforms in probably, but all the points leading into the platforms is going to have to happen at the side here, so that you have a nice sweeping flow through, and probably some slightly curved platforms as well. So I'm going to rethink some of the plans, and just in terms of positioning of point work on the second deck, so that I can get this larger radius, sort of fourth radius points in for later on, but that's for another year. Right, I'll crack on. Okay, to explain it very simply, so The two main lines that come out of Aylesbury, so these would have been the old Midland lines, went up to Rugby and beyond, or past either side of the roof beam, and then effectively past the beam they can basically join into a Y with 2 points to allow me to turn around the steam trains. And also I have a little bit of extra space here so that beyond the goods line I can have another line, just so that I've got somewhere to park diesels basically, and maybe some freight stock. But effectively at this point it's sort of the end of the scenic, so I'm going to have there was a long footbridge crossed to get from sort of Aylesbury town over to Aylesbury College, which my wife would have walked across quite a lot as she was a student of Aylesbury College. Well, it nearly went to plan, so I had to bring the Y, both tracks to this side of the beam. Just a bit too tight. I've run a few trains around, they're okay. So it's wide in, so the way I'm going to operate it is, obviously you come up on the down line into either platform 2 or platform 3, doesn't really matter. At this point you can decide, and then obviously the steam engine separates off, carries on the downline power to here, and then I've got a separate feed in here, because obviously when you turn these 2 points it's isolated, so that's still using the downline power. And I've got, because the switch has got the 2 positions, I can just power this part of the track separately from everything else. So you run around to there, and then you basically go back to the downline normal to bring the train back round, and then it basically has to cross over, still using the downline power, to then come back and recouple up with the front of the carriages. Okay, I'm just out in the garage finishing off the last of these backseam boards that I've got for the back of the Amersham, but this is probably a good place to sort of try and end the first part of this Aylesbury board. I realised that actually in reality I don't need to rush, because the plan was to finish roundabout in Aylesbury by Christmas this year, so that I can move on to the next level, second deck, next year. And I've still got 4 months to go, so why am I rushing myself? So I'm working on the point rodding underneath. It's no different to what I've shown you before. I'll update you on that next time, but I sort of thought this is probably a good point to just introduce some of the buildings that actually exist at Aylesbury and the layout. So this image is quite recent. It's got so you can sort of see in the far corner there's the new colouring that came in I think in the 90s. I'm just guessing at this point, okay. And the station is obviously going through a bit of a revamp and is looking a bit, dilapidated. And then this later one, so I think this is probably more recent. You can see that the concrete slabs and the tarmac in the middle has all been replaced. They've got the blue, everything's painted in the blue. And behind it, so I remember it as a giant Swarovski factory, sort of shed, enormous. And that would have gone on the old sort of goods yard part of the station. That's now been knocked down, and now it's all sort of flats and stuff. So, but the Aylesbury I'm sort of going for is probably better represented by this. So I'm looking across the platforms to the Aylesbury town centre behind. So here's the DMU from the sort of period I'm modelling, and this giant building here, which is a car park, and so it's that sort of grey image. The wasteland behind, this was the old sidings, good sidings from the 60s. It was just a rough and ready gravelly car park, okay, so there's no tarmac, no lines, everything. It's just you found your space, and as you turned you created ruts which created puddles. So this is probably a good image of how I want to have the backdrop looking. I don't need to model Aylesbury, because you realise that when you're on the station platforms, the whole of the backdrop is sort of quite dominated by 2 buildings and trees. So the first building is this one. So I, at the age of 7, had returned with my mother to to Aylesbury to pick up our house and get the keys for it. My dad was still out in Singapore. My sisters were up in Lincolnshire with my grandparents. And as we arrived, and if you think about it, I've returned from sort of colonial Singapore, not Singapore of today. Okay, so the tallest buildings were just 2 or 3 stories high. All of that has gone. Singapore, very different sort of place today. And we sort of arrived at Aylesbury Station, and I stared at this building and thought, and I still remember it today, wow, what is that? That is just amazing architecture. Okay, I didn't actually realise at the time it's a car park, and it's at the time it was quite modernistic. This has been recladded. It's got more struts and it's had a fresh, but there was more of a concrete, so the spacings between those pillars was a lot thicker and wider. So I'll try and find some older images of the Friars Square car park. And then the other building behind, so this is Pooley's Folly. So here's another shot. There's loads of shots of this. So Aylesbury is the county town of Buckinghamshire if you're not from the UK. So obviously in the UK we're broken down into counties. So you've got Oxford, Hereford, Shire, so the Shire towns, and then up you've got, you know, Yorkshire, Northumberland, where we sort of near to us, and Aylesbury is in Buckinghamshire. Buckingham itself is quite a small town, and so Aylesbury is sort of the main administrative hub for the sort of council. And this was their office block that was built in the 60s. It's giant and it dominates the landscape around. You either love it or hate it. It's a sort of listed building today. I'm going to have it in the backdrop. It may just be as an image, too complex to build as a scratch build at the moment. Love it or hate it. My father-in-law hates it. He calls it Pooley's Folly, but that's another story. So that's one image. The car park is obviously here. But it's this image more than any other, I think, that really represents Aylesbury to me as from my childhood, and that's memories, okay? And it's all about telling the story. So this is looking from the other side. So this is Friars Square. It was a shopping centre built in the 60s. Obviously the giant Woolworths, it was on 3 stories, completely gone. It sort of was the main shop in it, and obviously I remember the Sainsbury's and the Aylesbury ducks that you could play in. I'll have images of those later. There is a great image of those on the back of a truck being driven around Aylesbury at some point. But anybody who remembers Aylesbury from the 70s will remember the Aylesbury ducks that you could play in. Sort of giant fiberglass ducks that a child could climb inside. And the Wimpy Bar that obviously overlooked the market, the new market square that replaced the old one. But the more important thing is it's in black and white, and the more I thought about it, so I've got these old buildings that my dad built for me, and they're in a bit of a terrible state, and I just thought, hang on, my childhood was in black and white in terms of telly, and a lot of my memories are, you know, I suppose from that period and watching programs and stuff, everything. We didn't get a colour telly till I think 77, I think. And so I'm going to have Aylesbury, when I show you images of it in the future, you'll see it in black and white, because it recreates that memory of my childhood, I suppose, for me. And so I think that's the way I'll be able to get around the fact that those quick, super quick kits with their sort of garish colours don't quite marry up with maybe if I was trying to fill in the gaps with the other parts. Anyway, that's my thoughts. We'll see where it gets to. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this episode. I know it was recorded over a long period of time and maybe a bit disjointed. But we'll see. If you want to hear more about the backstory of Aylesbury, please let me know. I don't normally ask for comments, but a few people do comment. So if you do want to know a bit more about the backstory and the layout of the station and how it's evolved and changed over time, I can explain that. If you're not interested, that's fine. I'm just documenting the building of my layout, as you know. Anyway, as always, thanks for watching, and maybe I'll catch you in a few weeks' time. Cheers.